have an in the museum gallery. It shows how the captions were kept in the shoes, but not the real people. It's not real. Yeah. Ago! Ago! Can we all come together, please? Let's start the talk here. Don't worry, after talking, I'll give you some few minutes to do photos or to look around. All right, so ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, I'll give you a brief history about this dungeon. This structure dates back to the 17th century. The English constructed it around 1665, and it took them over 100 years of rebuilding, demolition and addition before the English came out with something like this. And let me say this, the labor used in constructing this building were Africans, though they brought in some few masons, carpenters and artisans from England to help with its construction. And also, when you look at the history of this land, you realize that this land changed hands about 5 times among Western Europe. Let me say this, the Europeans fought among themselves for this land. Now, they knew so well that whoever occupies this space controls the gold and the slave trade. And when you control the trade, the basic thing is you'll make money for your company or your country. The Portuguese were the first to occupy this land. And let me say, the Portuguese were the first Europeans to explore West Africa. They came here around 1471. And 1482, the Portuguese constructed the first European structure in sub-Saharan Africa by the name Alamina Castle. Around 1555, the same Portuguese occupied the space and named this area Cabo Corso. It's a Portuguese word. English, you can say Short Cape. And it is believed that when the English took over from the Dutch, they renamed it to Cape Coast. The Portuguese did not construct anything permanent. They constructed a temporary building made up of wood. They later vacated this area to Sweden. So Sweden took over around 1653 and constructed a fortress they named Harrisburg. 1658, Denmark fought Sweden and kicked them out. 1660, Holland also kicked out Denmark. 1664, the English also kicked out the Dutch. You know, that same year, another colony in North America also changed hands from Holland to England. I'm talking about New Amsterdam, which later became New York. It was that same year that this place also changed hands from Holland to England. So when the English took over, they constructed something like this. And interestingly, they lived here for more than 300 years. They vacated when we had independence on 6th March 1957. A long time, yes. And also, when we talk about castles and forts along the coast of West Africa, it is estimated that West Africa had about 50 of them. And out of that number, Ghana had more than 40. So let's say Ghana had about 95% of all the castles and forts West Africa had. We had them for one good reason: gold. You see, in our history books, in the mainstream history books, they say the Europeans came to spread the gospel. But that is a big lie. Right. They knew what they were looking for. You know, Prince Harry, the navigator and all that, realized that there was a lot of resources in West Africa. From the account of Mansa Musa, the emperor of the old Ghana Empire, you know, this man has so much wealth in gold. From some of the European visitors who made it to his empire, from their journals, they even reported that the docks in his palace, the color was made up of solid gold. You know, Mansa Musa was a Muslim, and you know, every faithful Muslim would have to travel to Mecca. Whenever he travels to Mecca, the value of gold in the Middle East drops. This is to say he carried a lot of gold along. He did similar in Egypt. he collapsed the economy in Egypt for about 25 years. So this news about Mansa Musa spread all over the world. The Europeans got to know that yes, there was gold here. Unfortunately, Mansa Musa's empire collapsed as a result of his generosity and as a result of the invasion by the Arabs. And interestingly, he established the first university in the world at Timbuktu. It is rather unfortunate that they've demolished everything. They don't want to leave any evidence to say that the first university in the world was in Africa. So that is the news about Mansa Musa. Did you know he's the richest man ever to live on earth? He was worth about 400 billion US dollars. That was the amount of gold in dollars he accumulated about some centuries back. So this news about Mansa Musa encouraged the Europeans to come to West Africa. They came and realized that whatever they had was true. They had gold in this country. Henceforth, they called Ghana the Gold Coast. But today, my emphasis will be on the Atlantic slave trade. From day one, the British constructed this castle for the slave trade, not the gold trade. I think some of you will agree with me on this, some of you will not agree. We live in a capitalist world now, and capitalism, as we know, had its root from the Atlantic slave trade. Now ventures, businesses, schools, universities in the US and all that came about as a result of this. And some of these businesses or ventures exist today as I speak to you. I can mention some few. I can mention Bank of America, JP Morgan Chase, Lloyd's Bank, Barclays Bank. Wall Street in New York was an auction block before we had the stock and bonds. Unilever, Lehman Brothers, the list goes on and on. So because of this talk, we witness how others suffered for others to enjoy or for others to try. So here we are. This room used to be the former slave market, where the English merchant waited on their agent to supply them with captives. And unfortunately, our ancestors were bought here. And after they were bought, they were marched down to the courtyard. And at the courtyard, they were branded. The various companies had their names under a piece of metal. They put the metal into fire, so the oven was red hot. Your hand, your chest, or your back was stabbed. From the records that we had, many died through the wounds because the sore was not treated. Many died through infections. Yeah. So after they were branded, they kept them in the dungeons to await shipment. So that is the history behind this. And often we also hear that people say, oh, Africans sold Africans to the Europeans. But to me, that is not a real fact. This is the real fact. Before the Europeans came, we had nothing like ethnic warfare or tribal wars. We lived in peace and harmony with our brothers and sisters. Nobody felt that there was a need for you to leave this continent because there was enough food, there was enough water, everything was good. Now the Europeans came and it changed. And let me also take you back to the servitude system of slavery we had some years back. You could have a slave, but you treated your slave as a member of your community. You didn't have the power of life and death in your captive. He or she maintained his name, language, culture, and identity. The Europeans realized that and capitalized on it. More like, I know you have captives, sell me your captives. In my own discretion, I say Africans sold captive to the Europeans, perhaps having the notion that that was the same system of slavery they were going to practice. But unfortunately, nobody traveled back to Africa to tell the hard ordeal they encountered over there. Because if Africans had known, this wouldn't have happened. And also, a lot of division was created among us by the Europeans. So with that division, you could easily fight your brother, or you could easily fight your neighbor. So this then actually continued all over West Africa and Central Africa for years. So that was the genesis of the Atlantic slave trade. When the Europeans needed human labor, they enticed Africans to do so. Any questions or comments before we continue with the talk, ladies and gentlemen?
Can I ask a question?
Yes, please.
Now you said that the African enslaved were here. Nobody knew what was going on here before they actually left. Since enslaved were here, no other African knew what was going on here to go back and tell them what was going on?
Some of the Africans knew, especially those who stayed closer to the castles or forts along the coast of West Africa or Central Africa, that you realize that majority of the people were brought from the interior, which is so many miles from here. So now somebody brings captive from Mali to the border between Ghana and Burkina Faso, sells that person, somebody buys them to Kumasi, and another person resells them again. So, you know, spreading the news about what was happening here was something. And I can also say that greed on some part of the Africans made this business also to thrive. Yeah. You know, now some of the other tribes wanted to have dominance over the other tribe. So with that, I would have to fight my neighbor. And all that. Yeah.
So you say that prior to the slave trade, there was no strife between the African kingdoms?
There were, but it was very minor. It was very minor, but when the Europeans came, tribal wars and ethnic warfare intensified. I've done a thorough research on that, and I realized from the statistics I had before they came, though there were a few tribal wars there, but it wasn't very high. But when the Europeans came, tribal wars and ethnic warfare intensified. Yeah, it's well done. Okay, Mansa Musa, let me say today we can say he's Malian, because when we look at the old Ghana Empire, that is present-day Mali, some part of Mauritania, Niger, northern Cote d'Ivoire and all that. They had their capital in Mali, Timbuktu. So we can say maybe Mansa Musa was a Malian today, because geographically, that's Mali today. Yeah, yeah, that region. Yeah. Okay, so I'll take you through another interesting place. I'll take you through the governor's apartment. So when we visit the dungeons, you will know the contrast between the governor's place and where the captives also left for about 3 months. Okay, so let's go up this way again.